there's been like a transition in you in like 3 to 4 months. You know, there's been like an evolution already. I'm hearing you say you're having realizations and recently, and before it seemed harder, right? Yeah. And now it seems like there's something that's unlocked inside of you. So I'm curious, what is the business vision that you have? What's the number you want to reach?
Yeah.
And personally, for the business, all these things.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about being a billionaire. It's just going to take a matter of time. Yeah. When do you think being a billionaire will happen for you?
I'd like to do 5 to 7 for $1 billion. I'd like to hit 10 and 10. That's what I would like to do. I think that we can do that math-wise, based on kind of the inflow of deals that we have, how like the returns that we're getting, in general. Like I think we can do that. But the thing that like really drives me though is Acquisition.com is the wealth machine that is behind Alex and Layla's media, right? And so I wouldn't be a very good business educator unless I had proof or evidence that I actually was good at business, right? And so we obviously could just sit on the laurels of the 3 exits we had last year. But to me, that's not like, as crazy as this will sound, it's not super impressive, you know what I mean? At least for where I want to go. And so I want to have a billion or multi-billion dollar thing because I think it would be so cool. Like how cool would it be if Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk and all those guys had documented everything that they learned throughout that path. All we get is these snippets, shareholder letters every once in a while. And it's just like, they're so little and they're going to die and we're going to lose it. We're going to lose all those lessons. And so part of it that excites me is just calling my shot because I think that always just like enlivens a little bit of the competition, but I do believe from a mathematical standpoint we will get there. So it's not, to me, it doesn't feel like a super big. I'm not really pointing that far to the fence, but seeing the hordes, the scores of businesses that are using the stuff in the books and the courses and YouTube and podcast and TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and use those and the message I get every day of like, dude, you helped me go from $1 million to $5 million a year. You helped me go from, quit my job and then start my dog walking business. And now I'm doing, 6 figures a month. And like those stories, I know that I will probably never meet most of them. I will probably never work with the vast majority of them. But the fact that it's happening just amps me up. Like it just gets me so lit.
That's cool.
And so the media has been really cool and new for me. But I like it, and so I'm learning it, and so it's a new thing that I get to learn, and so I'm really loving that.
Yes.
And then seeing the vision of where we're going in terms of what we're building on the Acquisition.com side and the companies that we're scaling there and the impact that they're having, because many of them are also education businesses, not all of them, but like probably about half. Seeing that on both sides, like us directly influencing through media, and then the actual wealth machine on both sides, like I just see them both expanding.
That's cool.
And so we were talking before this, but it was like I saw a limit with Gym Launch, Prestige Labs. Like at least my vision was limited, and that could have been me being younger, or whatever it is. But like, I don't feel like my vision is obstructed in terms of where this can go, and so that is what amps me up. A buddy of mine sold his company for a couple billion, and he's been in a little bit of like a rut since then. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting after people sell for a lot of money, why do you feel like they go into a depression or a funk after they sell $1 billion company?
They lose the vision, right? Like the vision, like I think the vision is another word for hope, right? It's hope for a better future. That's what we're marching towards, right? And you basically give that away to someone, right? And
for money.
You sell it.
For money.
Right. Yeah, in exchange for money, right? And then the hope ended up fueling you more than the money ever does, but different conversation. But but he said this one thing to me, and it really resonated. He's like, I'm just looking for my next big bone to gnaw on. And that visual, for whatever reason, like stuck to me. And so I'm like, I just need a big bone to gnaw on, knowing that I'll never chew through the entire bone, but being pumped every day to just get a little bit further down the nub. You know what I mean?
What happens if we don't have a vision for our lives?
I think you have less direction. And so you make less progress because you can't make progress unless you have direction, because otherwise you're just moving. So like you can only have direct, like a vector, right? Movement in a direction if you know where you're trying to go. And so it's like the first thing we have to do is figure out where we're trying to walk, and then we can start walking there.
Yes. You said you want to be a billionaire in 5 to 7 years, so you kind of see the math playing out that way.
Yeah.
Let's say you were forced to do it in half the time.
Yeah.
3 years, you were forced to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Or some catastrophic event would happen.
Yeah.
What would it take from you to reach the $1 billion goal in half the time? What would you need to do differently? And how would you need to think and act differently?
I would probably onboard more operators faster. That being said, the current plan gets us there in like 3 years. I say 5 to 7 publicly because I want to give myself a little buffer. I tend to be that way because like I have probably a little bit different approach with goals. Like I want to hit every goal. Like I don't like missing goals. And so for me, I don't like teaching myself or teaching other people that if I say something's going to happen, it doesn't happen. Because some people are like, shoot for the moon, think really, like I think you absolutely should think really big. But then like, okay, how do I make a goal that like, and then once I have that goal, do the activities that make it unreasonable not to hit it. Like if I had to hit this goal, to your point, what level of activity would I have to do that it would be unreasonable? It would be unacceptable based on how I see reality that I would not achieve it. If you're like, I want to learn sales, I would say it's unreasonable that if you get on 10,000 sales calls, you will not be good at sales. It'd be unreasonable. Okay, how long will it take me to get on 10,000 sales calls? Right?
A lot of time.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? A couple of years you could do it. Okay. So then that's a goal. You know what I mean? Like, and I can set that, and if I do the activities, it would be unreasonable that I'm not, now realistically, you probably get there in half the time, right? Because you're probably pretty good at sales even after your first 3,000 calls, right? You're probably pretty good. And so with this, we would, what we're doing now is the only thing I could probably do is take on bigger companies. That would be the shortest path. But I feel confidently, like in terms of how much we're stretching, I feel good about it. Like I would feel like I'd be taking on more risk to hit that, if that makes sense.
If you had to do it
Yeah.
in half the time with less risk,
Yeah, with less risk.
what would you need to do?
That's a good question.
What would need to happen? What would need to shift inside of you?
Yeah. I would need more people faster. I mean, it would just be...
How many people would you need?
I would spend more aggressively on talent acquisition. So I would basically go into, like, from the debt perspective, right? So rather than think of the businesses or like the portfolio companies as cash flowing towards me, I would probably take all of the excess that is there and plow it into talent earlier. So right now I live on a certain amount of cash flow, et cetera, from, just from the portfolio companies. And I probably have gotten accustomed to that. And so I don't like cutting below that. So if I had to, then I would say all of that money, rather than going to Alex, is going to go into more talent,
team.
Bigger, faster. Yeah, exactly.
Invest in
and
your
then they
team.
would amplify, and then they would be able to, we would increase our rate.
You would have less money in the short term over a couple of years, but then you would have way more money in the long term.
Totally.
So it's a comfort level.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, as we're talking about it.
Yeah, you knowing that you like to have a certain amount of cash flow every month.
Yeah.
But you've got a bunch of cash in the bank too.
I know. It's 100% illogical.
If you had to do it though, let's say you had to do it in 2.5 years.
Say if we had to do it tomorrow.
If you had to do it in 2.5 years, because you need time too.
Yeah.
5 to 7, you had to do it in 2.5.
Yeah.
And you had to stretch and get extremely uncomfortable, where you're not going broke. Obviously, you got money.
Yeah.
How many people would you need to hire?
Yeah.
And how much less cash flow would you need to have?
I mean, I would eliminate my cash flow.
All your cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, if I was really going, I was going ham on it, I would have no cash flow to me. I mean, I don't need.
You have money though.
Yeah, I have money. Right. Yeah. So I would eliminate all the cash flow to me, and it would 100% of the money would go into the team. The only thing that would go faster than that is that I drain my own net worth to further
fund.
Yeah, exactly. I would be incurring financial debt to more quickly build the enterprise value of the asset. So I'd be transferring money into the asset fast. It's like you incur different types of debt. Like if you incur no debt when you start a business, you do always incur debt. You incur management debt, you incur technical debt.
Time debt.
100%. And so people, like, all businesses start with debt. It just depends on what type of debt you're dealing with, right? And so if you don't have money, then that's fine. You just incur other debt. Like even when we think about how we're building the holdco right now at acquisition.com, like I am building more fixed cost in the infrastructure right now because of what I want it to be in a year, 2 years.
Yes.
And so if I wanted to run it, like we already do reinvest, obviously a big percentage, but I would just reinvest more
into
and
team.
Be okay with it. Yeah, I've just grown accustomed to this. And it was funny because a buddy of mine I had dinner with last night sold his company for $250 million. And we were talking about how cash flow is a very regular reinforcer from a behavioral standpoint. Like you get this feedback directly every month of how you're doing, right? And so you, as entrepreneurs, or at least for me, I've been always a high cash flow entrepreneur. Like I've never been like a reinvest every dollar into the business. I like making money from my businesses. But that has become a trait that I have learned to look at as my barometer every month. Like, how am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing? And so it would have to, so to the question of like, what would have to change in me? I would have to change how I measure success, and then I'd have to reinforce the behavior in a different way. I'd have to measure it differently. We just have to boil it down to the first principles of the math. Like what math is required to make $1 million, right? Like we can either sell you know, $110,000 things. We can sell $1,000 things. We can sell, and when I say things, you don't have to price your product at $1,000. Your just lifetime value of a customer has to be $1,000, right? So just how much somebody's going to spend with you over the period of time that they buy from you in general.